Live from Cleveland's Acacia Plantation. It's the local Central Park. It's beautiful and it has deer and lots of birds. So we're talking about Sefirah to Omer. We are now in the 36th day of the counting of the Omer. Why do we count? Everyone knows that between Pesach and Shavuot, between Passover and the holiday in which we receive the Ten Commandments, we count 49 days. The 50th day is Shavuot. What's the story of the counting? So the Rebbe would quote a midrash. Beautiful story about a king who had a large kingdom, and among his government, there were people who did things that were not desirable to the king. So they ended up in a pit, in a dungeon that the king would actually walk by frequently and talk to the prisoners there, the prisoners of the government, and pick their brains, because he knew that criminals have the best minds sometimes, but sometimes they get caught too. So he often has conversations on his strolls with these people picking their brains, and he ends up taking a very serious liking to somebody who fell into that pit for whatever reason. It was in there. He says this person, he starts talking to him, and he meets with him again and again, and he talks to him, and he says this person is really smart. He's bright, he's creative, he's focused, he's intelligent, he's kind, you know. Maybe before, we'll just forgive them and move on. And then he spends more time with him, still in the dungeon, and he says, you know what? He finally proposes to this gentleman. He says, you know, I've spent so much time with you, I see. Thank you. We're back. So he says, I've spent so much time with you, and I see that you are a truly high caliber human being. You don't belong here. Not only that, but I have a daughter who needs to get married. Very strong. The reception's going in and out over here. Anyway, let's try again. I have a daughter who needs to get married, and I want you. I pick you as her husband. You will be the next king. You will be the prince, and you'll be the next king. And in a few days, I'll take you out of this dungeon. And a few days later, morning, he comes, and the king arranges for this man to leave the dungeon, and he gets him dressed up, and he all showered and well. And the man is thinking to himself, wow, if the king fulfilled his first promise that he's going to take me out of this dungeon, then I trust he's going to fulfill the second one, which is to have me marry his daughter. And the king says, yes, in 50 days, you will be married to my daughter. Get ready. And that's what he does. Hello again. And so for the next 50 days, he starts counting and counting. 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. He's counting for the day that he will wed the king's daughter and become the prince. So too says the Medrash that God took Egypt, and he told us that in 50 days you will, he says, in 50 days you'll be married to me. And then the Jewish people started counting. For 50 days we're counting and preparing ourselves for the great wedding between God and the Jewish people, which is Shavuos. And I'm getting disconnected over here every few seconds. So we'll try this again. Long story short, the reason why we count is because we are preparing for the wedding. The Matan Torah, the Ten Commandments, at Mount Sinai was the chuppah. And that's the story. Now, aside from that, smack in the middle of the 49 days of the counting, there's a major holiday that we all just celebrated 2 days ago. And that was BaOmer, the 33rd day of the Omer. There's a lot of discussion about that, but the main events that we celebrate are the passing of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, the author of the Zohar, the main book of the Kabbalah, and the stopping of the passing of the 24,000 students of Rabbi Akiva who died as the tradition tells us, because they were honoring each other. They did not respect each other as they should have or could have. So about these two things, how do we celebrate? We go out, tradition goes back hundreds of years, we go out into the field, we make bonfires in honor of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai's life, that he brought this great light into this world. In Israel, Meron is a big mountain full of fire, and everywhere else too. And also because a mystical understanding of the bonfires is because our sages teach us that a person should, during this time, we increase in our love for our fellow. Something I've never heard before, this part about the bonfire, is I heard it from the Yanuka in Israel. Said that one of the reasons we do the bonfire is because we're reminding ourselves that our sages teach us it's better to throw yourself into a bonfire than to embarrass another Jew. Better to throw yourself into a burning furnace than to embarrass another Jew. So, to embarrass another person. So, it's a reminder also. It's not just the glory of the marshmallows and the s'mores. So that was one beautiful thought, a new thought that I learned. I see him in Shmuley. And moving on. So Rabbi Akiva, the whole lesson that everybody calls from Rabbi Akiva's story is that we should love our fellows as ourselves. Rabbi Akiva Omer, ze klal gadol b'Torah. This is a great big rule in the Torah. Now, how could you really love your fellow as yourself? So, the basic idea of holidays. Why do we have holidays, and why do we have Lag BaOmer? Holidays are like illuminating lampposts with guides, with directions saying, do this, go there, to help us reposition, recalibrate ourselves, our minds and our hearts to the way they should be. So Lag BaOmer is one that helps us recalibrate our love for our fellow. So we'll talk about that a little bit. So can you really love your fellow as yourself? The Ramban, I just turned around because there's no reception there. The Ramban, Nachmanides, the biblical commentator, he says it's really impossible for someone to love another as they love themselves. And he says that's why the Torah says, V'ahavta li'reacha. You should love. What does li mean? Why doesn't it say V'ahavta et reacha? Love your friend. It says li'reacha. Li means to, or that which belongs to. So Ramban says what the Torah is asking of us is to respect our friends' possessions and lifestyle as if it is ours. And he details it and says that whatever you want for yourself, you should want and try to obtain for your friend also. If you want wealth, make sure that your friend is wealthy. If you want health, do what you can to keep them healthy. If you want knowledge and wisdom and good character traits, everything you want for yourself, you should try to make sure that your friend has it. And then the Ramban says an interesting thing. He says, but in the nature of the beast, he says a person, even if he does act kindly and do what he can for another, a person will naturally still want more for himself than he wants for someone else. So yes, I want my friend to be successful. I want my friend to have money, health, wealth, and knowledge, but I want to have a little bit more, says the Ramban. On that note, parenthetically, it's a cute, very cute, beautiful lesson and teaching from another biblical commentator, Ibn Ezra. Ibn Ezra was also a biblical commentator, and he lived in the Rambam's times, and he was very poor. He was a great scholar, but he was very poor. And he was so poor, everything he tried, and he always wanted to make his own money. He didn't want to take from anybody, but everything he tried failed. So he said, he was a poet also, and he knew it. And he said, if I become a candle maker, the sun will never set. If I would sell shrouds, people would never die. And the story goes about Ibn Ezra that a friend of his wanted to help him, knowing that he's so poor. He wanted to help him, but he knew that he wouldn't accept money outright, a handout. So he followed his footsteps, and he saw that every day Ibn Ezra crosses a bridge to go from his home to the shul in a populated area. And he went ahead right before Ibn Ezra came out. Avram Ben Ezra was his name, and he put stashes of bills that looked like they were fallen in a public place that belongs to anybody. They're called hefker. They're free for all, and he put them across the bridge. And he was watching from a distance. And he sees that Ibn Ezra, he says he's sure he's going to pick up the found money, which is according to Jewish law, he's allowed to take it. And he watches from a distance, and he sees, as he reaches the bridge, suddenly that Ibn Ezra closes his eyes, covers his eyes, and walks across the bridge, like holding on. Crazy story. And he misses all the money. He gets to the other side and continues on to shul. So he runs over to him and says, "What just happened here? Why did you cover your eyes?" So he says, I walk this way every day. I'm just wondering, a thought popped into my head, do I know the way that well that I could cover my eyes and do it blindfolded? Amazing. So Ibn Ezra, again, taught. He said, if something's meant for you to have it, you're going to get it. Don't worry about it. Hashem will, of course you got to do something to make it happen. But don't be jealous of what other people have. It's a parenthetic to this whole story. Because you're not going to get what somebody else has if you're not meant to have it. So don't worry about it. Anyway, that was the story of Ibn Ezra. So that makes the 10th commandment, which is lo tachmod, don't be jealous of other people's stuff. That makes it very easy. And moving on, so now how do we actually love our fellow? Going to the Hasidic masters. Our Hasidic masters teach us that it's okay to disagree with other people. You don't have to agree with everyone, but don't confuse your opinions with your feelings. It's okay to disagree, but you still love them. And another story demonstrates that, where a Chassid, some visitor to a town somewhere back in Poland, Russia, he visited and he saw came to shul in the morning, and after davening, he noticed two friends sitting down and learning halacha and gemara, or mishnah, whatever they were learning, but they were learning such beautiful character traits that he said, well, these must be best friends forever. And they were learning and talking to each other so nicely and so kindly, and they didn't always agree on everything, but they spoke with such respect. And then they get up and they leave. Later in the day, this same man goes to the marketplace to do some shopping. In the olden days, the markets was outside, and he noticed that these two same Jews, the chavrusa, they were fighting with each other. They were arguing. They had competing stands, and they were arguing bitter. They were literally quarreling. He got so confused. He goes back. He said, are these the same people? He goes back for mincha, and he sees after mincha they sit down and they start learning Torah again, and they're best friends again. So he walked over to them. What is going on here? How's this happening? How is it that you're best friends over here, but over there in the market you're fighting like dogs? He said, we're best friends. In the market, it's the ruble that's fighting. It's not us. We never fight. It's the money that's fighting. So too, don't let your opinions get in control of your feelings. And going a little deeper, rabbis talk about when we look at another person, how do you love another person? It's just the way you love yourself. You look at yourself, and no matter how many negative things we have, we still love ourselves. We still respect ourselves. We still treat ourselves okay. We should treat others and notice only the good things that they have. Forget about the other stuff. That's a tip. And moving on, the Alter Rebbe in the Tanya talks about this. It says that, I don't know where I am. I think I have to go that way. And he says that the way to truly love another is to realize, to look deeply. That which divides us, our bodies, our shirts, our clothing, our possessions, are things that divide us. What unites us, what makes us whole is our soul. What's the true essence of a person is their neshama. And with that, number one is Av Echad L'Chulana. We all have the same Father. We all have the same God. Number two is we are all Koma Achad Shlema. We are one. We're one building. We're one being. We are one human form, and that's what we are. And a person shouldn't say, oh, a person wouldn't say, oh, my hand did something wrong, so I'm going to hit my hand. No, your foot did something wrong, you're going to hit your foot. You don't hit yourself, your body, when it does something wrong. So too, you should look at another Jew as if it's part of your body. And if you look at the word in Hebrew, Ahava, which is love, has the same numerical value as echad, which is 1. Ahava is 13, echad is 13. They're both number 13, so, but they're equal numerical value. So when you look at each other, everyone else has their one, they're part of your 1, then you love another. Finally, to end with a beautiful quote I heard from the Rebbe, not exactly words, but idea. Getting cut off over here a lot. I'll have to find a new running around. The Rebbe said it's much easier to sympathize with a person's sorrows than it is to rejoice in their successes. But we should work on that. We should work on rejoicing, truly rejoicing when somebody else succeeds and has more than we have, and has what we have and much more. Just like we rejoice when our child succeeds. A parent loves it when their child succeeds. Children love it when their parents succeed. So too we should look at every other Jew. That's the story for today. This week's parsha is Bahar B'chukoisai. It's a double portion. Bahar is the mountain, B'chukoisai are the laws. And you can look it up there. God bless you all. Shabbat Shalom. Share.